The evening sun was sinking beyond the hills, bleeding its last amber light across miles of open land. The wind whispered through the dry grass, bending it like waves under a tired ocean. The ranch lay quiet, the kind of quiet that carried the weight of years. Only the creak of a half-broken barn door and the distant cry of a hawk broke the silence. Jacob Morrow wiped the sweat from his brow, leaning on the fence post. His hands were rough, cracked like the land itself, proof of decades of hard labor. The old ranch had been his father's, and his father's before that. Once laughter had filled this land, the laughter of his wife, the giggles of a baby boy. He barely had time to know before death took them, both in the cruel storm 3 years ago. Since then, the only thing that kept Jacob standing was work. The land didn't comfort him, but it didn't judge him either. The horizon was burning orange when he saw her, a lone figure, staggering down the dirt road, clutching something small, wrapped in a faded blanket. Her steps were uneven, her hair tangled with dust. The baby's faint cry carried through the dry air, slicing through Jacob's chest like a knife. He straightened, squinting as she came closer. When she finally reached the gate, she looked like she might collapse. Her lips were cracked, her eyes swollen with tears and exhaustion. She clung to the bundle against her chest, as though her very soul lived inside it. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, sir. Save my baby." Jacob froze. He'd heard pleas before, from neighbors losing crops, from men begging for work. But this one hit something raw inside him. He looked at her, then at the small face peeking from the blanket. The baby's skin was pale, his breath weak, his tiny fingers twitching as if fighting the cold. Jacob opened the gate slowly. "You'd better come inside," he said gruffly. The woman staggered through, nearly tripping. He caught her arm, surprised by how light she was, little more than bone and desperation. He led her into the old farmhouse, the air thick with the scent of hay, coffee, and faint smoke from the hearth. He set her in a chair by the fire. "Name?" he asked. "Clara," she whispered, brushing the baby's cheek. "Clara Miller." "And the baby?" "Samuel." Jacob nodded. He poured a cup of water and handed it to her. She drank slowly, hands trembling. The baby whimpered, and her face twisted in pain. "He hasn't eaten since last night," she said, tears welling up again. "I tried to feed him, but I haven't eaten myself. I don't have milk left. Please, I'll do anything. Just save him." Jacob turned away, jaw tightening. The memories came back. His wife Anna, cradling their son by the same fire, whispering lullabies before the fever took them both. He had buried love that day. He had promised never to let his heart feel again. Now here was this stranger, a mirror of his own loss, begging him to care again. He glanced back at her. Her clothes were torn, her shoes caked in mud, her hands red from the cold. The baby's weak cry grew softer, fading into a whimper. Jacob knelt down and touched the boy's forehead. Fever. He rose and went to the kitchen. From the cupboard, he took a small tin of goat's milk he'd been saving, poured it into a pan, and warmed it on the stove. He found a clean rag, twisted it into a makeshift cloth nipple, and dipped it into the milk. Slowly, he brought it to the baby's lips. The baby sucked weakly, then stronger, and for the first time Jacob saw color return to his cheeks. Clara sobbed quietly, watching. "Thank you," she whispered. "You've already done more than anyone in town would." Jacob said nothing. He just watched the baby drink until his tiny eyes fluttered shut in sleep. When the quiet returned, he finally asked, "Where's the baby's father?" Clara looked down, shame clouding her eyes. "Dead. The fever took him 3 months ago. We had nothing left. I tried to find work, but no one wanted a widow with a baby. I walked for days. I heard there was a ranch out here. I didn't even know if anyone still lived here. I just prayed." Jacob sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're lucky you made it before dark. These plains aren't kind after sundown." She looked up, tears shimmering in the firelight. "Please, sir, I don't need anything for myself. Just take Samuel. Feed him, raise him, let him live. I'll go. I'll find a way to survive." The words stabbed Jacob deeper than he expected. He looked at the small, sleeping face in her arms, fragile, innocent, and undeserving of the world's cruelty. He turned away, pacing. The floorboards groaned beneath his boots. He thought about his son, about how helpless he'd felt when he couldn't save him. And then he thought about the silence that had followed, the years of loneliness, the empty crib upstairs gathering dust. He clenched his fists. You can't just leave him here. He needs his mother. Clara shook her head slowly. He needs life, sir, and I'm too weak to give him that. You have food, a home, strength. Please, take him. Jacob looked at her again, really looked at her. The desperation in her eyes wasn't fear. It was love, pure, burning love that was willing to die for its child. He stepped closer. If you want me to save your baby, he said quietly, his voice rough, then stay. Her breath caught. She stared at him, uncertain she'd heard right. Stay? Jacob nodded. You and the boy. I'll give you food, shelter. Work if you can, but you both stay. That's my condition. Clara blinked back tears. Why? Why would you do that? Jacob's gaze softened, though his voice stayed firm. Because I've already buried one child in this house. I'm not burying another. The fire cracked between them, lighting their faces in warm gold. The wind howled outside, but for the first time in years, Jacob felt something inside him shift, something that had been cold for far too long. Clara lowered her head, clutching Samuel close. Her tears fell silently onto the baby's blanket. Then we'll stay, she whispered. Jacob nodded once quietly. Good. You'll need your strength. There's stew on the stove. Eat what you can. I'll get the spare room ready. He turned toward the hallway, but before he could leave, she spoke again, her voice trembling with gratitude and disbelief. Thank you, Mr. Morrow. You saved us. He paused in the doorway, the firelight drawing shadows across his weathered face. Don't thank me yet, he muttered. Morning's work comes early. Outside, the night settled over the ranch, wrapping it in silence. But inside, life stirred again. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Jacob stood by the window later, watching the stars burn faintly above the dark fields. Behind him, Clara slept beside the cradle where her baby now breathed peacefully. The old house, once haunted by memory, now echoed with the faint sound of a child's soft breathing. And for the first time in years, Jacob Morrow whispered a prayer. Not for forgiveness, but for hope. Dawn crept slowly across the wide prairie, spilling pale gold through the cracks of the old ranch house. Jacob Morrow rose before the rooster's call as he always did. But something about the morning felt different. The silence no longer pressed on his chest the way it used to. Somewhere down the hall, a baby's soft breathing mixed with the hiss of the wind against the windows. For the first time in years, the sound didn't haunt him. It steadied him. He brewed his coffee, the aroma cutting through the cold. As he stepped onto the porch, the horizon blushed with fire and rose. The land stretched endless and loyal, and Jacob felt the strange warmth of belonging stir again. Behind him came quiet footsteps. Clara stood in the doorway. Wrapped in one of his old flannel shirts, the baby cradled close. Her hair caught the dawn like strands of honey. You're up early, Jacob said. I couldn't sleep, she replied softly. It still doesn't feel real that we're safe here. You are, he said simply. Long as you stay. She smiled, faint and unsure. Then I'll stay. Da! A fragile beginning. The days that followed unfolded with the rhythm of new life. Clara helped wherever she could, mending torn saddle straps, washing, cooking. She moved quietly, as though afraid of breaking something sacred. Jacob watched her work with the same silent attention he gave his cattle, steady, observing, trying to understand the creature before him. At night, when Samuel cried, Jacob found himself standing outside their room, listening. Each time the baby's cry softened into a sigh, a strange comfort filled him. The house no longer echoed with ghosts. It echoed with life. One evening, as the wind howled over the plains, Clara found Jacob sitting by the fire, turning an old photo in his hands. It was cracked, the edges worn. A woman's smile stared out from another world. His wife, Anna. Clara hesitated. She was beautiful. Jacob didn't look up. She was the heart of this place. When she and our boy died, I buried more than them. Clara lowered her gaze. I know what it's like to lose everything. For a moment, silence hung between them, thick as smoke. Then Jacob handed her the photo. You've got courage, Clara. Don't lose it. Da! The storm. Weeks passed. Spring brought restless skies, clouds, swollen with rain and lightning that split the heavens. On the evening the storm hit, Jacob was still out repairing a fence when the wind rose, driving dust like knives across the fields. He barely made it back before the first thunder cracked open the sky. Inside, Clara was pacing with Samuel in her arms, the baby wailing from the noise. When Jacob entered, drenched and mud-streaked, she ran to him. "I thought you'd never come back," she cried. "I've faced worse than a little rain," he said, forcing a grin. But as lightning flared, his eyes caught the fear in hers, not just of the storm, but of losing again. The wind rattled the windows. The lantern flickered. Without thinking, Jacob reached for her hand. "You're safe, both of you." Clara's fingers tightened around his, trembling. In that single heartbeat, the walls around them, of pain, of pride, of loneliness, cracked wide open. "Da!" Healing hearts. When morning came, the storm had washed the world clean. The fields glistened under the sun, and the air smelled of new beginnings. Jacob saddled his horse and rode the fence line, the same route he'd ridden 1,000 times, yet everything looked different. He found himself thinking of Clara's smile, of Samuel's laughter echoing through the yard. Hope, small but fierce, took root. By summer the ranch hummed with life again. Clara planted flowers by the porch. Samuel learned to crawl on the kitchen floor. Jacob laughed for the first time in years, a deep, rusty sound that startled even him. One evening, as the sun melted behind the hills, Clara joined him by the fence. The wind played with her hair. She looked out across the glowing fields. "When I first came here," she said, "I thought I'd only stay long enough to save my baby. But now, this feels like home." Jacob's throat tightened. "It is home," he said quietly, "for both of you." She turned to him, eyes shining. "And for you too, Jacob. You saved us, but I think we saved you too." He smiled, the lines around his eyes softening. "Maybe so." Da! A new sunrise. Autumn came golden and gentle. Samuel toddled across the yard, chasing leaves while Clara laughed. Jacob watched from the porch, his heart fuller than the harvest barns. Life, once empty, had become rich again. That night, as stars spilled across the dark, Jacob spoke softly to Clara by the fire. "I used to think God forgot about me, but maybe he was just waiting to send you." Tears filled her eyes. "I was waiting for someone to remind me how to live." He reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined, strong and certain. No words were needed after that. The silence between them was peace itself. Da! Epilogue, the light that stayed. Years later, the ranch was known for more than cattle. It was a place where lost souls found second chances. Children from nearby towns came to play. Travelers stopped for water and left with warmth in their hearts. Jacob and Clara raised Samuel under the wide western sky, teaching him that love isn't what you find, it's what you build, even from brokenness. Every evening as the sun sank behind the hills, Jacob would watch the horizon and whisper the same words that had changed everything. "If you want to save the ones you love, then stay." And he always did.